Genesis Noir bridges the gap between video games and interpretive animated cinema very well, for the most part. Conceptually, this 2021 point-and-click puzzler developed by the tiny Brooklyn-based studio, cleverly called Feral Cat Den, works better as a 3 to 5 hour visual experience rather than an interactive one for many reasons. It's labeled as a noir adventure spanning time and space, which is an appropriate summation for the most part, even if things tend to stretch the genre in the back quarter a bit, with an impressive, colorful late-game chapter, despite how antithetical it presents itself compared to this tale's stylized, pulpy beginning. I'm not going to spoil any of the later moments in this review, but I'll show a clip after the credits if you're into seeing it. As a fan of film noir, stylized animation, and jazz music, this is a product that seemed tailor-made for me. The art style is simply gorgeous and very close to the sort of work I used to create in college as an aspiring illustrator. It shares more than a few passing similarities to Isabelle de Verger's Distance to the Moon, an animated short based off of Italo Calvino's Cosmic Comics tale. This isn't all that surprising considering how vocal Genesis Noir's creative lead, Evan Anthony, has been about his inspiration for creating this cosmic quest. It also reminds me of Genndy Tartakovsky's Samurai Jack quite a bit, with its sparing use of dialogue and heavy emphasis on music. I'll also throw the triplets of Belleville in there as well, because I'll take any chance to reference and recommend that jazzy French Sylvain Chomet film. Still, directly comparing this to anything doesn't truly do it justice. There's a simplicity and fluidity to the visuals here that clicks with me on so many levels. Everything is rather monochromatic at the start, but as the story pushes forward, more color eventually gets introduced. Careful, purposefully, and unique. It's beautiful from start to finish, or rather, start to the first progress-halting bug you may experience, but I'll get into that a bit more after I continue to sing this thing's praises. You are No Man, a watchmaker in love with the voluptuous nightclub singer Miss Mass. The Universe. Golden Boy, the saxophonist in the band, is Energy, and you're tasked with preventing him from offing her with a bullet. It's all a bit abstract, and certain sequences are open for interpretation, but ultimately, these three characters and the gunshot represent the Big Bang. Throughout its runtime, No Man will solve a variety of different puzzles as the esoteric story plays out. It's the perfect length if everything plays out seamlessly from a technical standpoint. There are a few secrets and clickable diversions, but not enough freedom to necessitate multiple runs. That's not a bad thing though. Personally, I treat Genesis Noir as a showcase for friends, as the total time it takes to complete makes for a decent replacement for a movie on a night in. A one and done exhibit. It's priced accordingly and a perfect example of a worthy Xbox Game Pass title. Skill Bard's inspired soundtrack accompanies the visuals tremendously well, from its jazzy beginnings, ambient atmospheric pieces, to the explosive modern pop crescendo it all builds towards. I'll be buying this on vinyl if and when it's available. It's incredibly good. if you were as disappointed with Disney Pixar's Soul as I for its lack of musical themes, this may fill that void. Genesis Noir filled that soul hole for me when it works properly. Let me just continue to drive that home. So I guess let's just get into it. My time with Genesis Noir was, in a word, frustrating, and I'll lay out the beats for you. First, I tested this thing out on Xbox's Game Pass during a live stream. It immediately grabbed me, but thought I'd play it on my own time with a mouse and keyboard, so I downloaded the full version on PC with all of the extra chapters that were eventually added. I got to this point, which is one of the new stages, and it locked up. Now this is a puzzle game. A simple one, mind you, but a puzzle game just the same, so I thought things were finally getting a bit more challenging. This is a big problem and an even larger waste of time since you're expected to suss things out, if you catch my drift. Like in a more straightforward game, I'd have probably suspected that something was wrong sooner. I looked up the chapter solution only to realize that I had done everything correctly and that this was a bug. Further investigation showed that Genesis Noir has a ton of unresolved issues leading to various progress halting problems. I'll give the developers credit, they're very active on Steam and other sites, offering players fixes, but it did throw a huge wrench into the immersive pacing for me, not once, but twice, on a PC that is quite capable of running this game smoothly. Once the main story has been completed, a chapter select appears in the title menu, which is well and good, but first-time players will be forced to restart the entire thing if they should happen upon one of these bugs. To add insult to injury, you're committed to a stage with no way of returning to the Big Bang gunshot room that acts as the game's level select of sorts. So if you're boned, resetting is the only option, and for a product that is this narrative driven with cinematic scenes that can't be skipped, it's a real problem. Why weren't quick saves implemented? I've been playing point-and-click puzzlers since their inception. Being able to create multiple files has gotten me out of quite a few jams. I understand that Feral Cat Den wanted us to tuck in and be at their mercy, but there's no excuse for such an oversight in this modern era. It comes across as pretentious. You're going to play this thing the way we want you to. This is an experience. Well, yeah, but a heavily flawed one if something technical goes wrong. Maybe others are more patient and forgiving, because I nearly uninstalled Genesis Noir after this happened a second time in another added chapter. From what I could gather, I clicked too quickly, and no amount of exiting, restarting, reinstalling made a lick of difference. This time after 2 hours of gameplay. Nothing spoils immersion more than feeling like you're walking on eggshells. Delicately redoing puzzles I'd solved 2 or 3 times with the looming threat that it could all stop working at any second. Chapters should have been introduced at the beginning. A way out of a stage when things go haywire would have helped, and the absence of a quick save is, as I said, inexcusable. As a result, I considered quitting the game for good, but the story had already grabbed me, so I finished it on the Xbox, making damn sure to skip all of the content not included on launch day. I realize this is coming across like a rant, but when I say this spoiled my overall enjoyment of Genesis Noir, I mean that with zero hyperbole. It's less like a video game crash and more akin to a film sputtering out halfway through with the inability to pick up where you left off. I'm sure I would have loved to revisit this indie animated movie with tiny swaths of interactivity peppered throughout if it hadn't been for these problems. It's ironic that the thing I was enjoying so much was the pacing, and as I effortlessly solved puzzles rhythmically before it all abruptly came to a halt. Twice! I envy those who were able to see the end credits without a hiccup. There are a few other minor gripes I have as well. I mean, I'm now a pro at this game's first half after all, so I may as well address them. No Man controls fairly poorly in the exploration sequences. It's not a huge problem, as you'll never have to react to anything quickly, but he's often a bit stubborn to move around, specifically on the PC in these overhead walking regions. He's more cooperative on a console with the analog stick, but still gets hung up on stuff. Now, personally, I found most of the puzzles a breeze, almost embarrassingly so, but I've witnessed others struggle occasionally, simply due to them not understanding what was being presented to them visually, or when to take control of the character in general. Genesis Noir does an exceptional job immersing the player, in my opinion. One of the first things I noticed was how seamless and unobtrusive the cursor is on screen, but others may find this off-putting. Outside of a few introductory bits of text describing the chapters, there's zero external guidance. This is a huge plus from my perspective, perspective, but admittedly, it's not for everyone. To me, everything felt appropriately placed, and I always knew what had to be done organically, so I've got to hand it to these developers for making me feel entirely absorbed in this often abstract world they've created. My last minor complaint is more of a nitpick. Sometimes puzzles or events tend to wear out their welcome. I can only think of 2 specific moments, with only one that felt like padding. There's a laboratory and some frequency knobs. You twist that, adjust this, and tweak these several times, while repetitive cinematics interrupt the flow. They aren't bad per se, but I was already a bit scared of progress halting bugs, and almost thought I'd encountered another here. Had it not been for the new dials and devices introduced each time, I may have gotten more worried. It just goes on too long. Similarly to a few endgame sequences that I won't show, but had me click on faces numerous times just so the developers could get their point across. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to Genesis Noir, and I know I missed a lot of the more allegorical references, but the story itself isn't all that complex. I kinda knew what was going on from the very beginning. Everyone in my live chat did as well. At a certain point, it felt like they were explaining it in a patronizing way, almost like I do in these reviews sometimes. Now don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed the way things played out, and even went back to view both endings, but by the finale, there weren't many surprises. I even predicted the clever little twist that appears when unlocking the 2 final achievements. It's a good story, but maybe not as clever as these creators thought. Wow. Jazz, artsy animated movies, who's pretentious now? Despite how much complaining I just did, Genesis Noir is a beautifully stylized work of art that should be experienced by anyone with an open mind. The story didn't affect me in a profound way, but it didn't really have to. Sometimes narrative simplicity is best, and while I did find myself rolling my eyes at a few of the revelations therein, I couldn't help but get absolutely absorbed into this wonderfully presented world. Nothing else is quite like this. Feral Cat's Den have created something truly remarkable here. Had it not been for the seriously off-putting issues I was forced to endure, I'd have called this a masterpiece, but unfortunately, I'm still a bit sour. I just hope they consider these things in the future. Point-and-click games absolutely need manual save options. I'd have liked to explore some of the themes in a bit more depth, but I genuinely believe that going into any further detail would ruin what makes Genesis Noir so special. If you're curious, it's available dirt cheap right now on Steam and as part of Game Pass. Please excuse the lower quality of the gameplay captured on console. It was taken from a live stream on Twitch because I honestly didn't know if I was going to actually be able to finish playing through this entire adventure. Next time on this channel, one more free view to wrap up November Noir, so stay tuned.